Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today, I've got an old friend on this episode. I still remember vividly the first time I met him, Mr. Larry Weishuhn. It was at a SHOT Show about 27 or 28 years ago, and I felt like I was pretty green still, and I guess you could call myself young at that point, but I walked in there and didn't know a soul, and the first person to walk over to me was this, I called him the friendly giant, Larry Weishuhn, stuck out a big hand, shook my hand, took me over, introduced me to Bill Jordan, and a whole bunch of other people, and we never looked back. So great memories. Welcome to the show, Larry. Great to have you on here.
Well, thank you so very much, Brad. And that did bring back a lot of memories. We had some great times there, and we shared a few hunting camps since that time, and looking forward to maybe sharing a few more in the future as well, too.
Yes, absolutely. We always have fun, but I think that's what the great outdoors is about, is having fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.
You're right. And somehow along the way, we have a tendency to learn a few things as well, too. And that, to me, is what keeps it fresh in you and makes that fun all that much more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, learning is a big part of your history, I'd say, as a professional wildlife biologist. And you really helped to modernize some of the whitetail science and management, especially in Texas. If I have the numbers right, you've influenced and worked on over 12 million acres of whitetail habitat to help productivity, antler growth, overall production, reduced predation, like the list goes on and on and on.
Brad, I was very fortunate. I came along at the right time when the interest in whitetail deer was kind of its infancy compared to what it had been in the past. Nobody knew what a mature deer looked like. Nobody maybe even cared for a while, but then all of a sudden, hunting opportunities increased, and people started taking quite a few deer, and they go, what if I can maybe shoot a little bit bigger, antlered, older deer? And as a result of that, going back to really the 1970s, that's when this kind of really started. And I give credit primarily to the interest in whitetail deer that we have these days. 2 dear old friends of mine, unfortunately, no longer with us, both from Texas. John Wooders, who was an outdoor writer from Houston and ended up writing the Buck Sense column for the Peterson's Hunting Magazine, and then Jerry Smith was a photographer. Now, up until that time in the 70s, Lenny Lee LaRue was a primary wildlife photographer when it came to whitetail deer, and the biggest deer that Lenny could find were 2 years old. Well, Jerry had access to the King Ranch and some of the other bigger ranches in South Texas and started taking pictures of bucks in full maturity. And really, when you get right down to it, those are the 2 guys, as far as I'm concerned, that really kind of brought the whitetail deer in terms of a little bit bigger antlers, a little bit bigger bodies to the forefront as far as hunters and the general public was concerned.
Yeah, they were leaders and legends. I remember reading their stuff for decades, and Rue photographed everything. He was an expert in his field, and his work still shows up in all kinds of places.
Great people, all of them. I'll tell you what, and I was very fortunate to call both John and Jerry very dear friends. Got to do a lot of things with them. But, we started learning from that, and the interest increased, and I was fortunate to be around at that time where we did a lot of the early nutrition research in terms of antler development, a little bit on the genetic side, a lot in terms of trying to improve the habitat in every facet, if you could, or we could, for whitetail deer. And the one thing we learned when we did that, the better the whitetail deer habitat was, the better the habitat was for all the other species out there, including songbirds and butterflies and all those other good things that are out there. But we're fortunate to come along at the right time when you get right down to it.
Yeah, and I'd have to say, I'd describe you as very dynamic. You know, you were a very successful biologist. Your timing was wonderful. What you produced for people was wonderful, which made you in great demand. But you were able to share a bunch of the knowledge that you gained there and beyond in your career as a writer, an outdoor writer, book author. I don't think I know anyone that's busier than you for speaking engagements at dinners. You've got podcasts and outdoor television. Like, again, a lot of people have learned how to hunt whitetail deer by watching Mr. Whitetail, which is you, Larry Weishuhn. And I think, what is it? You probably over 500 episodes of television that you've produced?
Yes, it's well over 500 now. At one time, years ago, when we had several different networks, I was on TV every day on one of the networks, and involved in numerous shows, and a lot of it was whitetail deer, and then finally, started expanding different other parts of the world. But you're right, and it's been fun. I was so fortunate, as I said, coming along at the right time, meeting around the right people. You mentioned the Mr. Whitetail thing. I always kind of tongue in cheek as far as I'm concerned. That started by a mutual friend of ours, J. Wayne Fears from Alabama. Yep. Now, Wayne and I used to hunt together a tremendous amount, and Wayne did an article about some of the guys who he spent a lot of time working with and hunting whitetail deer, what they were using, and I appeared on the cover of an old Harris publication, a deer annual, and with whatever gun it was that I had at the time, and in that article, Fears called me Mr. Whitetail, and I've always kind of giggled about it, but I'm very respectful of the people who consider me that. But right. It's been fun. It really has, even just to be known as Mr. Whitetail.
Well, you were deeply involved in understanding everything about whitetails and their habitat, which makes the title well suited. But the whole experience, your whole career as a biologist, and then I'm going to call you a modern communicator, because there's so many different ways that you do that. You've always shared the message, how to hunt, how to use a firearm, how to get the most out of your optic. But the one thing that's always intrigued me, and you know this because I bombard you with questions when we're together, is talking about the moon. You've got books and you had shows about trailing the hunter's moon. Well, there's a lot in that moon phase that is magical in terms of wildlife movement and understanding those creatures.
Brad, to me, it really is. Excuse me. Where this really started is many years ago. I worked for the Department of Veterinary Pathology in a contract with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department doing wildlife research, and particularly the wildlife disease research. And we had a whole bunch of deer in our pens, both in small pens and then also in a larger pen. And I noticed that, to that point, everybody go, well, they just move in the afternoon, early in the morning, and then at night. And I started paying attention to the deer, and there were times during the middle part of the day and mid-morning, mid-afternoon, and they'd be moving like absolute crazy. And so then immediately when I could, I'd get out in the field and see if I could find deer. And sure enough, when those deer in the pens were up and feeding, guess what? The deer out in the pastures were. So at the time, I had some friends who were serious bass fishermen, and they were using the Salooner charts or activity charts and feeding charts for fishing. And so I thought, man, this wonder if there's anything to this. So rather than look at the charts when the activity charts were as far as highs feeding, low and feeding, and all that other kind of thing, I thought, here's what the deal was, and let me start doing this. Well, back then we didn't have computers, so I got a whole lot of clear sheets of plastic, which I put down information as to time of day, moon phase, wind direction, temperature, all those kind of things. And then whenever I was out, I would make note of what the deer were doing, what time of the day I'd see them. And fortunately back then, we didn't have trail cameras, but I spent a lot of time at night on different ranches with spotlights looking at deer and trying to get an idea of what was there, and started paying attention. Well, then I started laying all this stuff down on a graph to where you had this overlay of several sheets of plastic, including the moon phase, and which was very much involved with the as far as the fish top feeding times were concerned. And lo and behold, guess what? Those primary feeding times and minor feeding times, or a time when there wasn't supposed to be any activity, held pretty much true in almost every instance with whitetail deer. The two exceptions being is when that rut was going really, really strong and bucks were just chasing, 24 hours a day, or if there was a situation where there was a lack of food and those deer just had to be up and hustling all day long to try to find something to eat. But outside of those two things, the moon phase, which influenced those lunar tables, were almost exactly. You'd see that they would predict that the primary feeding time would be at 10 o'clock. Well, guess what? At 9:45 to about 11 o'clock, those deer were up and feeding. And or 3 o'clock in the afternoon or high noon or whatever, there was just a lot more activity during that time frame when that was supposed to be the case, when the moon phase was telling us that's what was going on.
Yeah, and I paid major attention to everything you were writing and other people and any information I could get on moon phase. And I'd say from my own experiences, I found out that it is very precise. It is very accurate. And, I'll give you an example. I had too many assignments one month, and it was deer season. Mm-hmm. And I was locked to my desk feeling sorry for myself. And I said, okay, yes. I have to be smart. I can't go out all day. So I looked at the chart, and it said the daytime movement that particular day was going to start at 11 o'clock in the morning and move through till about 1 o'clock. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to work. And at 10:40, I put my stuff on, walked out in the backyard, sat down against a tree, and 20 minutes later, the biggest buck I saw all year came strolling down the game trail. And it was just after 11 o'clock, and I became a believer. I'm like, wow, this could actually change the way a lot of people look at hunting, the times they spend in the field, increase their success rates. It can be a game changer.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
It can and it should be in a lot of different ways. Now, there are always exceptions to the rule, and so lots of times I'll look at it, the activity chart, and I say, well, the feeding time is going to be primary time. Let's say it's going to be between 12 and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, does that mean I'm going to wait to go out the field until about 10:45 or 11 o'clock to go out? No, because I'm going to be out. I love to watch the sun come up. I love the squirrel coming alive, all those kind of things. So I'm going to be out early, but I'm going to hunt very hard during that middle part of the day, meaning hard meaning in that instance maybe spending a little bit more time trying to be a little bit more observant of what's going on around me, kind of thing. And but it's amazing. There's so many times over the years that I have purposely looked at activity charts and then not looked at activity charts because I wanted to go out without knowing and saying, so I wasn't influenced by the chart going, well, I'm going to see things then, but I'd go out and sit all day long and, I'd mark down what I'd see and when I'd see it, the times, and, again, all the temperatures, all that kind of stuff, and then get back that night into camp and look at the charts that I had with me, and lo and behold, they were almost exactly spot on. It said the deer are going to be up feeding at, 12 o'clock. By golly, at 11:59, they started showing up, kind of thing. So it's always amazed me how closely those things work to me, again, am I going to hunt strictly by them? Yeah, no, but probably more no, because, again, there's always that exception. That old buck that you're looking for may be bedded somewhere they're not supposed to move until midday or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he's bedded in a thicket somewhere, and a hunter just happens to wander through there and spook him out. So, I may get a chance at him then, but I really gotten to the point where I expect to see those animals when the activity charts say they're supposed to be there, and they always are.
Yeah, there's very few exceptions, and you're right about spending the entire day there. I think what the moon phase information gives me is a time to really stay focused, not go back to camp and have lunch or have a rest or, have a siesta or be in the truck driving around. It is a time to be in your prime spot, focus, and be alert. And it really does change the game, because I find even when the moon phase says there's little or no activity at first light or last light, there still always is some, because it seems to be when deer really like to move. But, I remember hunting predators at night in Texas, and it was a real eye-opener because everything was bedded. You could see the deer and the lights and stuff like that. All of a sudden we hit that magic moment where the moon phase says, bang, there's going to be activity, and literally everything was on its feet. There were skunks moving, there were foxes moving, the deer were moving. Everything just came to life, and when that time period ran out, you could not find a critter on its feet.
You're exactly right in so many different ways. I'm so fortunate. Again, years ago, we didn't have trail cameras like we do now. So I was out all night long on some of the ranches because I'd be out there in the daytime, really wouldn't see anything. And thought, let's just get up in the night. And I was wanting to see where the deer were, what they were moving, what they were doing. And you're exactly right. When that say it's supposed to be activity at 1 o'clock in the morning, guess what? Didn't hardly see anything at all until about that 12:45, approaching that 1 o'clock time, and then at 1 o'clock, it's like there were eyes everywhere, and of all different critters. As you just mentioned, foxes, coyotes, bobcats, rabbits, coons, possums, skunks, and deer, of course, as well too. So it didn't really make a difference. But and I've talked a little bit about this with Gary Robertson with the Burnham Brothers Game Calls. Gary and I've hunted together a fair amount in years past, and still fortunately get to hunt together every once in a while. And I know that Gary very much pays attention to those activity charts. He says that, that's when, if it says the predator is going to move, it may be 100 degrees, the wind may be blowing 30 miles an hour, but whenever that time frame comes, whatever that chart says, he said, you're going to see four-footed critters, up and moving. And so it works. Bottom line, it works.
Yeah, and it's funny when you pay attention to the details, because there's lots of little details out there, you can correlate things that make a difference. So what I've noticed over the years where I hunt in Alberta and mostly in Canada, although I hunt all over North America, is that those specific time periods when you're going to have an increase in wildlife movement, it all starts with the birds. And if you pay attention, you can be out there. There is not a bird peeping or squeaking or flying or anywhere. And all of a sudden, this moon phase period that is predicting wildlife movement comes on. And all of a sudden, the chickadees are up. They're chirping all around me. The ravens are over top. There's geese flying somewhere. And it's like, there's my warning sign. Everything's going to be up and going. And the birds, because they can be more mobile on wing, you just see them first, but they're really a cue and an indicator to get ready.
You're exactly right. There's so many times, particularly this last year, I hunted a place up in northeast Texas, out south and east of Dallas way, more east, I guess. And I'd be out there with the landowner, and then I talked about the activities, charts type of thing. We'd go out and not, again, purpose a lot of times I'll not look at them because I don't want to be influenced in that respect, maybe for a day or two. Now, I hunt with them all the time, but we'd be out and I'd be on texting each other, which to me, you ought to not be doing because you really ought to be paying attention. But there were times when there just was not anything moving. There hadn't been a crow fly over. You hadn't heard a blue jay. You hadn't seen any kind of movement of any kind of critters at all. And, we'd get back and look at the activity chart and think, well, there was no activity during that time frame. But howsoever, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, they'd be moving. We'd grab a very quick bite to eat, have them come in at about 11 o'clock, went right back out again and spent the rest of the afternoon. And guess what? Once we got out and approached that 2 o'clock hour, as you mentioned, birds are out everywhere, squirrels are out moving around. We've got armadillos. There are armadillos moving all over the place. And, of course, at the same time, you're seeing deer as well, too. So, it works.
Yeah, and it's funny how it correlates to all wildlife. It's not just deer. The moon phase, like I said, I really notice it when I'm predator hunting too. If there's no ravens or crows or birds moving, you can be in the best spot to call, and most of the time nothing's going to respond. You can go back to the exact same spot in prime time and call, and there's all kinds of response. The birds come in first and then get ready because chances are a coyote or something's going to be close behind.
And it does. It works. Like I said, to me, probably in predators, it probably even works better than does whitetail deer. Because sometimes because of hunting pressure, you and I are both fortunate. I know that you get to hunt some properties that are not heavily hunted, so the deer are not really that influenced by hunting pressure. And it's the same way with me down here. But when you discount that, or like I said, in some instances, I've been on properties here in Texas where we've been in the severe drought, and those poor animals have got to be on their feet 24 hours a day just to get something to eat. But, discounting those type of things, my gosh, be ready when time says be ready for deer to show up. You better be at my dad used to put me on my deer stand when I was just a little bitty kid. Started hunting by myself when I was like 5 years old. The last thing he'd tell me is he'd walk away from me. He said, "Now, son, stay awake." Now, he knew I was going to be awake because I was so intense. But that was his way of saying, pay attention. Don't be daydreaming about all kinds of things you don't need to be thinking about while you're out here hunting, because if you're paying attention, you're going to see things. And by golly, he was right.
Oh, yeah. I got to ask this question is, what is it about the moon and its light or pull or something that it impacts wildlife to create this movement? Is it more, is there a type of light that we can see from the moon, an ultraviolet type of light, or is it just gravitational pull like we see with the tides and the current in the ocean and perhaps the feeding activity of fish? Like, have they been able to narrow it down or see more than one parameter that actually influences movement?
Well, I've asked some of the real scientists, and some of the scientists, as I call them, don't believe that the moon influences activity on animals. I don't quite understand that because they obviously haven't spent the time out at all. But I think it's probably a combination of all the above. And the tide, you mentioned the tides, they're phenomenal. So there's got to be a huge magnetic force in dealing there. The same thing with the amount of the light coming off the moon. But at the same time, I've experienced that same kind of movement when there was heavy cloud cover, to where it really, there was hardly any moonlight hitting the ground because the cloud cover was so dense, so thick. So to me, it's probably more so on the magnetic pull type of thing that works on those animals as opposed to some of the other things. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's just the way the scenes have been kind of my experience both day and night when there's been a lot of cloud cover. It didn't make any difference when that activity chart said they're supposed to be moving. You were seeing animals. Yeah,
and because it's so consistent, whether it's a new moon, a full moon, or a partial moon, I think that it is more gravitational pull. I didn't know if there was somebody that's looked into more of it, whether there's some type of light like ultraviolet that comes through the clouds and can actually impact a gland in the deer or something else like we are often impacted by light. But gravity seems to make the most sense because I find the smaller creatures are the ones that move first. I always say the birds are going to move first. So you got a chickadee or something, and it is impacted more by that than a big moose or a black bear that's wandering around.
Exactly. And of course, you get to see more black bear and moose than I do. But I see the same thing in birds and in whitetail deer, particularly in Texas or in mule deer. And I've dealt a little bit with elk on different properties as well, too. And then, of course, too, we've got, a tremendous number of various exotic species in Texas. And even they seem to be ruled by that activity chart from the moon type of thing.
Yeah, I remember you telling me an interesting fact one time. I said, man, they're going to have a full moon tonight. The critters are really going to be out and moving. And he said, well, maybe, but from what I remember you telling me, the movement isn't associated with the brightest part of the moon at night.
It's not, in my experience. And my experience is fairly vast in a lot of different places. I used to spend so much time, again, out at night with the light on the ranches that I dealt with because I was there by myself quite a bit. Sometimes I'd call the game warden and say, you want to come out and look for animals? But we'd go out and it'd be like say the moon was going to come up. It got dark, say at 6:30. And by 7 o'clock, it was dark. The moon came up at 9 o'clock, and everybody was saying, man, next day you'd see cuts. Well, the deer were out all night long. When the moon came up, they got up. What I found from being out at night with the animals is that when it got dark, and there was a time frame there before the moon came up, guess when those deer moved? They moved in the darkest part of that evening. Once that moon got up, particularly when there was a more of a full type moon or 3/4 moon or larger, and then on the waning side, when that light got really quite a bit, those critters laid down. Same thing if say the moon came up and when it got dark, supposedly the moon was full and the moon's up probably about 20, 30 degrees. And yet those animals really would not move a whole lot until early that next morning. And talking about darkness, that moon would go down, say at 4 o'clock in the morning. So between 4 and about 6:30 or so, and the sun came up, there'd be a tremendous amount of movement. Whereas during the time frame when that moon was up above, they really didn't move very much. And that's I've seen that so many different places with whitetail deer. Again, going back before we had the trail camera things, but that's spending many hours at night on different places and watching animals of all kinds.
You know, I always remember you telling me that information too. And when I hunt a full moon, I make sure that I'm, in my hunting spot or stand an hour before legal shooting light, because the moon sets and there's a bunch of activity. We'll call it early morning before hunting light, but that trickles into the hunting day. So I found that,
yes.
Full moon, people say it's really hard to hunt. There's no movement during the day. That's not true either, but you can really take advantage of their key movement times after that moon sets, knowing that they're not out when it's the brightest all night, and be in your spot ahead of time so you're not spooking them, and it can actually work to your advantage.
Absolutely. And the two I've noticed in a lot of different places. I've spent a lot of time, again, like you, I hunt all day wherever I have the opportunity to, because I want to see what's going on as much as anything. And when we've had a full moon all night long, or basically a no moon all night long, the vast majority of the movement that I've seen on older mature animals particularly was during that midday period, say from maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock till about 2 or so in the afternoon. They'd be getting up and moving around. And of course, most of the hunters, because go, oh, well, I saw a lot of tracks they ran all night long. Well, not necessarily so, but where were they when the deer were moving during that midday period? Most of them were back at camp complaining about the fact they hadn't seen anything. Right. Or they're watching a football game, or calling friends, hey, would you see anything over there, kind of thing. But so to me, I get tickled sometimes. At their time frames, I try to look at the moon and the activity charts and all that kind of stuff when I can to plan a hunt. But like you, so very often we've got hunts back to back to back to back to back, and we can't really pick and choose. So, well, I want to hunt this day at this time. We're getting out and hunt, and so to me, I'm looking for those opportunities. And again, the moon phases and the draw of the moon, as far as deer are concerned, works with probably most of the animals out there. But everybody's got to remember, too, that those deer are individuals just like you and I and everybody out there listening. We may follow a lot of different trends, but we may be also one of those people or one of those animals that is contrary to what everything else is going, what everybody else is doing. So I'm always thinking, well, maybe there's that one animal out there that I'm looking for that, nothing's moving, but maybe he is, just because nothing's moving.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
Absolutely. And there's minor movements and major movements. You look at the tide again, yes. There's ebbs and flows, and yes. There's more pulls at some time. And if you dive into moon phase information, you'll find that there's a major, minor period of movement every AM and PM. And it's like the tides. You got those tides moving in and out over a 24-hour period, and don't overlook any of those. If it says a minor time period when things are moving, it's still going to be a better period than when there's no movement predicted.
Absolutely. Like I said, I purposely use the charts, and then there's purposely times when I have not, and it's just to see. Okay, I didn't want to be influenced. Well, I'm going to see it such and such a time. I want to go out, and I've done that a fair amount. But when I am hunting, where particularly if it's an instance where maybe I don't have but 3 or 4 days to hunt a place, or maybe 3 days, I really, in those instances, pay attention to those moon phases and the activity charts, because I have little time to hunt, and I want to make the very most of it. And I know from my personal experiences that when they say that critter is going to move, their critter's moving.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think hunters need to set their clock for a hunt day on only the movements that are predicted, but it allows you to be strategic on the times when you need to be more aware and in the right spot, or where the tracks were when you saw them. It allows you to be more focused on a prime area when movement is going to be at a peak.
And to me, I'm one of those. To me, hunting is both mental and physical. And the mental side of it, you mentioned being aware of what's going on. I used to mess with people. I'd give a seminar somewhere and have a penny in my pocket. I'd take that penny out and I'd hold it up, kind of look at it, and I said, "Gentlemen, ladies, this is my lucky penny." I said, "You know what? I'm going to just toss it out in the crowd." And I said, "Whoever has this penny, catches this penny, will probably kill the biggest deer in their life," kind of thing. And it's just a penny. And I'll look at it and I'll just pitch it out in the crowd. What is amazing, man, I said, the thing about it is, I said, if you got that penny in your pocket, chances are you're going to see something. And basically, it's going back to what my dad said, "Son, stay awake." Yeah. It always amazed me, because I go back the following year and the guy comes in. I got really tickled. I did a seminar up in New York and threw a penny out there, and the guy got it, and I didn't hear from him the following year. The following year, he showed up when I was back up there again, and he brought photographs of 2 near Boone and Crockett bucks. And in the seminar, he walked in and he said, "Larry," he said, "I've got to give something back to you." And I remembered who he was. I couldn't remember his name, but I remember his face. He said, "I've got to give you this lucky penny back." He said, "Since carrying it, I've killed 2 near Boone and Crockett bucks. I've done this. It's time that somebody else has this penny." So I graciously took it back, and I threw it out in the crowd again. And lo and behold, about 3 or 4 years later, this guy comes up and said, "You remember that penny that you threw out that guy shot those 2 near Boone and Crockett bucks?" I said, "Of course I do." And he goes, "Guess what I shot this past year?" He starts showing me pictures of what he was, he saw when he had that penny. And again, had nothing to do with the penny, frankly, but it had the fact that, hey, he was paying attention. And, and we had talked to him about the activity charts, those kind of things as well, too, and make sure that you're out in those times if there's any way possible that you can do. But don't overlook the fact that, there's nothing moving, yet you're hunting where there are areas where there are other people, and they're going to get up and walk around. Well, they may chase that buck that you're looking for right to you.
Yeah. There's if it's daylight hunting hours and it's legal shooting light, it's the right time to be out there. I use the Solunar information. Let's just talk a little bit about black bears. You were up here last year, shot a huge black bear, but there's no way you can hunt all of the hours in a day, because you could be hunting from 5:15 in the morning till almost 10:30 at night, and you'd be exhausted. But it's funny, because the people we hunt with up here, years ago, I showed them the app I used to look at the moon phase and the information for minor and major movements. And at first, they sort of all raised a brow at me and looked at me like, yeah, whatever. Now, when hunters are around and nobody has shot a bear, they pull out the app and say, "Okay, tomorrow morning, we're going to have you in the stand at 7:10 because the bears are going to be moving tomorrow morning with the moon phase." And by goodness, if somebody is having some bad luck or hasn't seen a bear and they put them out in those prime times, maybe it's like that lucky penny, but it sure seems to work.
I think in the last camp, I think we have 1 or 2 guys that had not shot anything, and I think if I remember correctly, they got out that last morning, and it wasn't until I got home that I looked at the activity chart. But guess what, Brad? the mornings they put them out, it showed a major feeding period right after daylight, and that's when those guys shot their bears.
Absolutely. So it is great information, and we do need to talk about where people can find this information. Now, there's lots of calendars that are still produced. If you look, there's a fish in the bottom corner of each day, and it'll either be all blacked out or half blacked out or stuff, and that's just general movement or fishing information related to moon phase. But there's apps and calendars and books and even tidal charts that you can use to predict more precisely, or even get it spelled out to you clearly when those movement periods are.
You're exactly right. I've got, I don't even remember what the names of some of those apps are, but I've got some of them that I've got on my phone, and then I'll get somewhere else too, and I'll just dial in, okay, major feeding periods for this, what the area is, maybe an area code or block or a state, or, a quadrant of the state, or that kind of thing. And even just doing it that way, there's so many sources available too out there. There are apps out there as well too, that like Hunt Stand and a bunch of those others that have all this information on there as well too. But it doesn't take a whole lot of looking to find that information when you get right down to it.
No, I mean, there's lots of apps nowadays. Years ago, there was only one or two, but if you go into your smartphone app purchase center there and type in moon phase app, you'll have lots of options to look at and consider.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But it is something I think people, if you struggle having success or finding game, this is certainly information that could help change your life. And it could be that lucky penny in your pocket to give you confidence, to give you focus, and put you in the right spot at the right time.
You are exactly right. It's worked for me from up right below the tundra, up in even up in the tundra when I've been up there on caribou hunting. But with whitetail deer, just below the tundra, all the way down into the deepest part of Mexico, and it's amazing how closely those things work.
It sure is. We're going to share a bunch of information about you, Larry, and where to find you, some social media stuff, some links, some of your other podcast shows, all that stuff, so people can follow up to get more information, because you do have an awful lot of it out there.
Well, to be honest with you, probably the easiest place, particularly with blogs, and I'll start doing a little bit more on the moon phase, is we're getting into the hunting seasons here now, but that's my website, which is, of course, www.Larry Weishuhn. It's all lowercase, run together, LarryWeishuhn.net. Good place to do that, and that'll kind of link people up with where they can find the DSC's weekly DSC's Campfires with Larry Weishuhn podcast, and the recent books that I've done can be found there as well too, to be purchased. And then too, I do a lot of stuff with a very dear friend and a dear friend of yours as well too, Luke Clayton.
Yes.
Luke and I do a weekly radio show. I can't remember how many networks. Of course, we turned that one into a podcast as well too, and that's called Catfish Radio with Luke Clayton and Friends. And I've been doing that one with Luke now for about 18 years. And then I know you love to cook. I know you love knives, and I do too. I'm not as good a cook as you are, but I've cut up a lot of animals. And so a few years ago, I really started looking at designing my own knives, and now have a line of Weishuhn whitetail knives that are available through vineyardmax.net and also through silverstag.com. So all kinds of places people can go and find me on Facebook, and gosh, I think there's even some Instagram and some other stuff out there as well too.
Yeah, and we'll share that information with the podcast.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge. It's not something we can take lightly. You spent decades collecting this. This isn't something you went out on a moonlit night and figured out on your own. This was hours of toil and information and stuff that you had to build and put together to come to some type of hypothesis about what was going on, and it does make a difference. So thanks for your diligence and your hard work, and staying focused on what the information could provide.
You're most welcome. I was kind of laughing there primarily because there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours that were spent in the field, not sitting in front of a computer looking at computer screens. Wish I'd had one back then to put all this stuff together quicker than what I did. But no, sir, this is the real life experience is what it comes down to. Yeah, and there's I'm going to end here on one little message that people should take to heart, and that is moon phase affects all creatures, including humans. And if you ask police what happens on full moon nights, they say that they work a lot harder and there's a lot more going on. But the moon phase also gives us the opportunity to be more alert on the prime times when animals are moving. So,
keep that in mind. It's another lucky penny to stick in your pocket when you're out there.
Absolutely. Brad, thank you so very much for allowing me to be with you, and we'll have to get you on my DSC's campfires here before too very long as well, too, and talk a little bit about what we did here, but maybe talk a little bit, too, about some serious bear hunting. You know how much I love to hunt bears, so yes. I need to pick your brain a whole lot more, sir.
That sounds great. Well, thanks for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and information, and thanks for what you've given hunters and the outdoor community for decades already. You're well read.
I appreciate it very much, and again, look forward to getting together with you around the campfire, and hopefully a lot of those folks that are listening as well, too.
Yes. Thank you, Larry. We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.